Welcome back, everyone. As Bobby C sees it, part two. Okay, stay tuned. I hope, you see me moving my hands around a lot. That's because I'm Italian. I use my hands a lot. What are you going to do? We did the last podcast. Mac took us through his experiences, indoctrination into Alcoholics Anonymous, programming of Alcoholics Anonymous, 5.5 years, came out of it, went into an isolation. Some may call it depression, whatever you want to label it at, it doesn't matter. He was doing a lot of soul searching, shadow work, blah, 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 a lot of things, doing a lot of research, checking out a lot of things in life, society, about the world and about the universe. Continue, Mac.
So yeah, it was from a place of isolation that I was able to kind of get some more information that resonated with me, and this was me seeking it as opposed to being coerced into it. It was like, I'm seeking this out, which changed things. And now, like, not everything has stayed with me as far as like a daily practice. Like, I was obsessed with like hermetic laws and went really deep into that. And I was
Yeah, you were
listening.
deep into the Hermetic principles, huh? Natural law.
Yeah, so I
That's
went
good. That's
I
not,
was
some of it's good.
yeah. And what it was is I was just seeing how that translated to life, and how it seemed to be almost governing things. And I was like, oh wow, this is interesting. And then the ancient Egyptology it got scary because I started having dreams. I had two dreams. I was obsessed with Thoth. All right, so Thoth being the scribe of the gods, being credited to being the person who invented written words and even language and all this other stuff. I was like obsessed with that because I had started to look at my language and how that had kind of put me in a trap. And I had two events to where I had dreams that Thoth came to me in a dream, and they were terrifying. And I stopped obsessing with Thoth after the second dream because I was in a tomb in one of these dreams, in a tomb, and Thoth is sitting on like sort of like this weird structure, just sitting there, almost like a throne, and says these chants, in an ancient language, and it like hit me, and I could feel it. And it was basically, I didn't understand it, but it was like, stop obsessing with this, stop doing this, you don't understand what you're even looking at.
Wow.
This is out of context for you, you need to stop.
How long ago was this? How many years
this
ago?
was like 8 years ago or
8
something.
years
7.
ago? Wow.
Yeah, so that is what stopped the ancient Egyptology. I was like, I got these, this papyrus with like art on it. During that time, I was like talking to someone from Egypt, and they were like, you don't understand that this is like, you're not even supposed to talk about this stuff in certain circles in Egypt, and you're going into this, and again, like, you don't understand the implications of this. And he was asking me to go to church with him. Actually, he was like, you need to go to church, because if you're looking into this stuff, you need to understand that like Christianity saved us from the oppression of ancient Egyptian religion. And I was like, so it was all overwhelming. And look,
that's another, he was into another fanatical whatever, 12, his own 12-step cult or whatever.
Yes, yeah. So basically, the only reason I mention any of that is just because it just shows you how, again, I was kind of desperate, but I was soul seeking and trying to find things that could answer some questions. And
yeah, but
and
you know what? The weird part about it is, I'm looking at this, I'm listening to you, and I'm putting together ppieces too. Now, this is years ago, you're saying. Okay,
yeah.
we're going to get in, we're going to keep on going and going. But, I'm a little older than you. I'm, an old guy, right? Just stay tuned, because your thing's not over. You may be revisiting some of that sometime, okay? Because that was pretty heavy shit, okay?
Yeah.
And I believe there are objective truths. I do believe that. So, but
yeah.
But go ahead, continue.
So yeah, I mean, basically, I mentioned that because it just gives you an idea of the amount of effort I was putting in, a good amount of effort into trying to figure stuff out. And ultimately, a lot of these things made my mental health worse, basically. And I became like an extremist with it. I was like policing not only myself, but like I didn't want other people to say certain things around me because I felt like they were going to curse me with their words. Like, I was really obsessed with language and input and the things you hear and all of that because of all
Yeah,
the
but you know
indoctrination.
the weird part about it is even with the language, because you're
Yeah.
into that now. You are into that, but you're not a fanatic with it. But
Yeah.
you're understanding that words cast spells upon us. Okay, and that's
Yeah.
true. Okay, so you're understanding all that because you mention it on all your podcasts, and I also too with this language, this alcoholic, this disease,
Yeah.
alcoholism, addict, blah blah blah. Words, you know, who made up these words? Okay, we could get into that, but go ahead,
Yeah.
continue about labeling.
Yeah. So basically, there was a lot of awareness around that. And again, I was trying to find out a new identity. So then I'm like, oh, I'm a star seed, I'm a light worker, and all that. So that's what I then fell into, was that was my new identity. And there was I just became, this is what happened. I realized that a lot of this awareness was not going to make me functional in a capitalist system. I was like, I'm very hyper aware of this stuff. And yeah, I maybe believe this stuff is true, but is this helping me to like operate in a system that's based on money and success? I was like, no, it's actually making me want to live in the woods and garden, and that's it. Like that was it. I really just wanted to not be a part of society.
Black or white,
And
though. That was kind of
yeah,
black or white thinking, right?
yes, it was like all or nothing. You're either a hermit out, a mountain man out in the woods who's just gardening and doesn't have any technology, or you're going hard and you're trying to be an entrepreneur or whatever. So I had to just balance that and realize that a lot of it was I felt excluded from very basic things. So I was like, there's no way I'll ever have a car. There's no, at this point still, I'm in my mid 20s, and I'm like, I've never had a lot of things that are very normal for a lot of people. Like my partner was gifted a vehicle, basically. Like we shared this. Like I never had a lot of stuff. And so I realized that I wanted those earthly human things a lot. So that was part of it too, is I was like, I don't think this is gonna work if I am obsessed with like the things that are insidious in our world. And but then I fell into like affirmations, which was very helpful. Affirmations changed my life. I teach people how to do personalized affirmations as part of what I do with some of my consulting. I'm a huge fan of affirmations. But then I did like law of attraction type stuff, and for me it was not. I was getting, I guess, the wrong information, because I like the act of assumption, or like the law of assumption, or what some people will call, to where you just kind of assume the best, but then you take actions to kind of make that happen. So it shifted from more of like, I'm just going to say things repeatedly, to I'm going to assume that better things are going to come my way. And that, based on a lot of opportunity to prepare myself, had it to where opportunity met preparation, like a lot of people say. And then I was able to get some opportunities. So all of that led to me getting on social media. And this is pivotal because I started to hear other people who I'd never heard before, harm reductionists, people who were doing alternative things. And I was pissed at first. I was like, no. And I had left 12 step already, but I was still deeply indoctrinated to where I was like, you're telling me people can moderate? Like, how dare you say that? And you're telling me all this other stuff. Like, you can take this and it'll help you. And it was just like, I fought it. My ego was like, no, this is not true. And more, even though I was just at the point to where I didn't even want to be alive, because I realized I didn't really know what I was talking about. So, it was very polarizing, very, again, like kind of black and white experience. And so basically what ended up happening is I just started to listen to other people. I started listening to harm reductionists. I started listening to people with different experiences. I started to hear just more broad experiences. I heard about smart recovery for the first time. I heard about refuge for the first time. I heard about, people who were just not even in the recovery space and they were just looking to change their relationship with substances or whatever. And it was just so overwhelming and just frustrating to me because I was like, dang, I really thought I understood this stuff. And then I started looking at how I affected others, my friends that I would try to get to go to 12 step, my family, how I like would project that, people had a problem if I witnessed them doing something or whatever. It was just, I started to really look at my own, just my own glasses, if you will. Like I was seeing everything through this lens of like myself, and I had to kind of like let go of that and start to validate other people was a huge part of it. And then I started referencing all the things I saw in 12 step and all the harm I saw. And that is what really got me to a place where I started to get mad. And I was like, this is not okay, what's happening. So it all was based on, it started with other people, me really starting to think about how other people were affected. And then I started looking at how I was affected. And then paired with understanding that there's better approaches, that is what brought me over to the side of things that were more evidence-based or clinical, or even medical or pharmaceutical, like things that were, more of a, evidence-based nature, if you will. So
you became like, in Alcoholics Anonymous, they talk about how honest, open-minded, willingness, but we become more open, truly open-minded, truly able to listen to somebody, maybe push back a little bit. Like me and you could push back on a couple things before we leave on this podcast, but to be able to be civil and not argue or not feel they take things so personal all the time about, oh, why is he, I'm taking this personal, like it's my identity in the first place, but I can relate to you. Go ahead, continue, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, that was it, is that my identity was tied to being a sober person in recovery. And I had to really unpack that and look at that. My first name on social media was Sexton Sobriety, actually. So that was, it was even tied to my handle on social media. It was all around that. And, that was when my content journey began. Like I kind of alluded to earlier, my content initially was all spiritual stuff. And then I made one video talking about benzodiazepines, and it did a little bit better. I think it got like over 1,000 views, which to me was like unheard of at the time. And I was like, oh, okay, well, actually, I know a lot about this, so I should talk about it. And again, it's somehow in denial of the fact that I had that full experience of thinking, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Now I'm back talking about the thing and sharing from this really generic perspective, but I thought that I was somehow doing it differently. I was like, this is different. It was not. It was the same regurgitated stuff. I thought that my personality was a little bit different and maybe made it more acceptable. And that's how I gained a following really on my first TikTok, was that I made really bad content, like really just generic 12-step influence content. And along the way, I just started to work more on it, and people would correct me, and some people would project and like, not give me valid input, they just hated me just based on my appearance and other things. And then there were some people who legit like they had valid input, and and I know that anyone who's being open and honest with themselves can tell if someone's giving you some valid input, like, and that's not always accepted, but it depended on where I was at that day. And so I just started to really listen to other people, and a lot of it was really, again, just kind of setting aside this idea that I had it figured out and realizing that I didn't. And then I figured out that you can actually figure this stuff out from a more up-to-date perspective. And so then that motivated me, like, okay, well, I thought I understood it. I don't. What if I did? What if I really put in the time to understand this from a clinical perspective, from other people's experience, all that. So I just dove into that really, really hardcore. And then around that time, I made a Clubhouse, which that was just, I don't know why at the time, I guess it was popular. So then we had a meeting on there, which I was like, this is going to be different. This is alternative. This is, not 12 step. And it was great. We had alternative, but we also, it was open. So people could just come into it. So then a lot of times we had 12 steppers in there. And so then there was a lot of that. There was a lot of existing in spaces and hearing, after leaving 12 step, hearing 12 steppers, and I just started cringing, just like, it started to feel like just bad anytime I heard these things, because I started to understand why they were problematic, basically,
Yeah, I still have a friend that's really heavy indoctrinated, and I still, we still chat, but we don't talk about recovery. He knows that, I'm not connected. I don't feel part of it. He was kind of appalled last time we met, that I told, I'm not part of it. It's not me. I just, if I went to a meeting right today and sat in a meeting, it would be so, it would hurt me, actually. It would be so like, because I deprogram everything, I program every page, every book, every literature, every, whatever. And I would be hearing everything that I know, and it would just be like toxic in my body. It would, it would be so appalling. I couldn't even take it, and it's harm. It would be harmful for me to go in. And, when I was in there, I was actually helping because I think you mentioned on one of your podcasts about you were attracted to people that went outside the program and grabbed some things. And that was me, even in the beginning. Even though I did everything, I never really felt that I really was in a part of it. I was, but I wasn't. It was like, and I wouldn't tell people that, but I was like, look, I left religion because my mother, I was born, my mother gave me her Catholicism, right? Gave me her Catholic religion. I did all the rituals, so I know religion. I know church, I know religion. I go in there. So I'm questioning religion. I want to get into Christianity. Maybe Catholic Church isn't right, so I want to go into Christianity. So I want to go to some Bible studies. Maybe that's the answer, to really get this thing that they're talking about in Alcoholics Anonymous. So I go to these Bible studies, and I want to deprogram them in the Bible study, because it's just like, so no, this don't even make sense. Okay. But I don't know how I went off on that.
No, but that's a really good point that you bring up, though, because it's after you gain awareness about the like indoctrination, and just really when you just gain awareness when it comes to groups of people and the flaws and downsides to that, it makes you very aware of a lot of different organizations, basically. And so, but the thing is sometimes people they go from one cult to another. So that happens a lot too. So for me, it was all right, AA and now New Age. And then I personally, I do not need to base my identity around any group. And that is what was so freeing about the, looking at the indoctrination and the deprogramming process, is that I've gotten to a place now, which you alluded to, that we would mention. So I went from being a hardcore fundamentalist 12-stepper to being someone who I don't identify as being in recovery at all, because I've moved on from that. And, you're not told you can do that. You're told that it is a lifelong battle, and that if you don't do A, B, C, D, that your disease is going to come back and it's going to be stronger. And it's like, I had to really fight against a lot of not just, experiences that I had in the past, but then to this day, it is so persuasive that even, in our culture, if you just talk to people, who identify as being in recovery, they will try to project that stuff back onto you. And
you're talking 100 years of society being indoctrinated. It's not just us, it's society. Society. Strange people that don't even know nothing about Alcoholics Anonymous. They're going to refer you to AA. Because society has told, the court system, the religion. Going to a priest, when I did my first fifth step, the priest told me, Bobby, make the big book your Bible and make the AA meetings your church. I was told that by a priest. Okay, so the Catholic Church is indoctrinated. I mean, they're like this with Alcoholics Anonymous, with the Matt Talbot retreats and everything. It
Oh
just
yeah.
goes on and on and on. Society is indoctrinated. So people, even right here, even my wife, but still they use the language, and I try to kind of little by little, you know what I mean? You can't be so hard on anybody, but I'm not going to label anybody alcoholic. I'm not,
Yeah.
when I say
No.
you're an alcoholic, I'm labeling them. How can I be an alcoholic? My name is Bobby. Bobby, I'm not. How are you saying that? That's
Yeah, it's just wrong, and it ends up being oppressive for people when you look at what they're being funneled into, and it's been a beautiful part about this is like, my mom, she was in AA before me, and now, we have conversations and she completely understands my critique, and she is like, yeah, I didn't want to be in meetings the rest of my life. I didn't want to call myself. She's like, why am I calling myself an alcoholic 14 years later? This doesn't make any sense. So, people realize this stuff, and then to be able to offer alternatives is what was so inspiring to me, is to go, oh, okay, I may not agree with the clinical space as a whole, but substance use disorder objectively is less, just sounds way better when it comes to all of the stigma tied to addiction or alcoholism. Like, it's not there. Like, I've had people offer the thought of like, compare those, think of an addict and then think of a person with substance use disorder. What do you see when you think of each one? You probably think of a stereotype when you hear the first one.
You mentioned that on one of your podcasts, and don't forget, everyone. I want you to go through right now. Let's go through your some of your podcasts. Look, I know you're on Instagram. You got 31,000 followers on Instagram. TikTok 59,000. Facebook 24,000. You have a presence. YouTube, check them out. Sexton Space, and then
Yep.
your Facebook is what is it, Maccauley?
Yeah, my Facebook is Maccauley Sexton. I have a backup on TikTok, Sexton Space 2. I have another account on TikTok called Alternative Recovery. That's the one that you can go to if you want more information on the Alternative Recovery meeting that's on Zoom. It's one of those things to where, again, like anyone who's looking into making content, I'd started this during quarantine. I was very bored, and I was like, I have a phone, so I guess I'll try this. And I got a lot of really cool opportunities because of it. And that's the people that I've connected with is like the best thing about it. I've met like people who I would consider to be like lifelong friends from there, and I've met people that I've ended up working with professionally on there. Like, it's something that can be really, really helpful, but just got to be aware that it takes up a lot of your time. And the reason I was able to grow a following on like my main TikTok account is because I treated it like a full-time job, and I posted 3 times a day, every day, would never stop.
Wow.
And you can have it taken away from you in an instant. So, I had that account was actually banned, and I got it back. And so it's very, it's one of those things to where you put all your eggs in one basket one time, and then you learn not to do that. So that's why I have multiple
you
accounts.
Can be banned so quickly. I think my fourth video, they kind of gave me a little strike and community awareness. So when I get things like that, what I did was I really got back into it, and I said, okay, what is fact checkers? You know what I mean? Who appoints the fact checkers? Who actually says you're a fact checker and you're checking for the global community? So we have a minority of fact checkers checking for the global community, saying if your opinion matters. I don't go for that.
No, I hear you. I mean, the thing is that even just, all right, like recovery content, substance use disorder content, or people who are actively using, it's a marginalized group on social media still. So they didn't even, like, TikTok didn't even understand that was a big community, or it didn't have any statements or anything. They released they have a thing you can find now. It is hard to find. I can't tell you how to find it. I don't know how I found it, but it was this detailed thing explaining harm reduction. They understand harm reduction. They understand recovery. They understand person first language and stigma. And it was very well put together. It was like really legit. But again, like, there's not really any, you can't, I cannot tell you how to find it. I don't know how. It was deep in there somewhere, and I found it and I was like, whoa, this is detailed and actually good. But the thing is like, for instance, like with Instagram, you know, my Instagram is all drug jokes, like not recovery jokes, drug jokes, because I like to make jokes about drugs. It's something that I enjoy hearing from people who use drugs. I enjoy having community of people who use drugs that are not in recovery, that are not looking for recovery. I like to hear from those people because they have some of the best insight as it relates to what they might want to do or stuff like that. So, but for instance, like that, you know, it's a matter of time before you basically get your account taken down if you're making jokes about drugs. It's one of those things that I believe that, yeah, there's ways to be mindful, and there's ways to have oversight that is preventing like really problematic stuff. And then there's just like really this kind of thought policing or this policing of things that are stigmatized. And that's what I don't agree with, because if your niche is within the space of ever talking about drugs, even if you're like a recovery creator, that means you're at risk of having your content completely wiped, you know?
Let me, you know what, I want to not push back, but I want to talk about some things that I want to ask you personally. Definition, let's make them quick. Let's go through a couple things just quickly. Your definition, forget the definition out there, because a person created a definition. Some person created a label or a name or whatever. What's your definition of harm reduction? And I'll give you mine.
So there's different aspects to harm reduction. So the harm reduction has, you know, an aspect as it relates to advocacy. So there is a practice of harm reduction. There is a practice of advocacy within the philosophy of harm reductions. That would be like policy reform. That would be, you know, advocating for personal autonomy and human rights for people who use drugs. So those are like the two first aspects. You can, again, look, the practice of harm reduction, which can be a personal experience or a personal protocol, the act of advocating for people with a harm reduction approach or a philosophy of harm reduction. And then you're going to have risk reduction. So risk reduction, that involves tools, you know, things that are associated with being more controversial are going to be actually in the risk reduction area. So my harm reduction is within, so I used to do like boots on the ground risk reduction, where I'm giving out tools. Now I still do that. It's just I don't go out in the streets like I used to doing that. You know, I still have those tools and I give them, but again, I'm just not like going downtown.
Okay, let's just jump on that. Let's just break that apart just a little bit. Like, you know, methadone came in. I think it came in the United States like in 1950 something. Methadone come over here. Okay, it was synthesized and came over here. Okay, so you're talking 1980, AIDS came about. So they started to do needle exchange back in the old, I was like 30 years old.
Yeah.
Okay, so would you consider that risk reduction?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, no. So methadone, no, I would not, because I would consider methadone.
Now, how about the exchange, needle exchange?
Yes. Yeah. That's by definition, that's what that would be.
Okay, that's risk. So just to give examples to the viewers, that's risk reduction.
Yeah. So like, so needle exchanges, access to like straws. So people have, you know, straws to use that are not shared, access to, you know, a lot of the, you know, just clean points, you know, pipes, things of that nature. So yeah, it all falls into a lot of tools that will then reduce that. Naloxone can definitely fall into risk reduction 100%. Generally, you know,
is that Narcan?
Yeah, naloxone, Narcan,
Okay, that's just the name. Is that risk reduction?
Yeah, that would be basically qualified as risk reduction. And you know, Narcan is just the name brand. But yeah, for those that are unfamiliar, naloxone is the active ingredient that you can find in other products, you know. But
Okay,
yeah,
so the methadone, what is
yeah.
that?
So yeah, so medications for
Suboxone.
so I call those medications for recovery, not medication assisted treatment. You know, that's something that my colleague brought up to me, and I think that that's a better way to kind of talk about it. Is that it's like kind of separating it when you do like the medication assisted treatment. It's like it's for me, it just makes a little bit more sense to say medications, recovery medications, or medications for recovery. And the key word there, recovery. So if someone is using illicit substances and they go to methadone or Suboxone, you know, there are going to be things that are just recovered just based on having access to that. Now, that doesn't mean that that person is then seeking some sort of specific resource. It just means that there's going to be things that are 100% recovered based in access to a regulated substance. So that doesn't fall into harm reduction technically, unless someone is using it with the intention of reducing harm. At the same time, yes, it does reduce harm for many people, you know, that again are using on the illicit supply. You know, for some people, they may have the experience that it feels like it causes more harm to them. If that's how they feel, then I'm not going to really push back on that. It's just that's why, again, I think it's safer to just say that medications for recovery, these are like recovery protocols, medical protocols, and to like associate them with harm reduction, they don't always apply to that. And I'm not saying that with the intention of being like, oh, it's because they cause harm. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying that it's, for me, more important to validate the fact that there are going to be things that are recovered just based on just the consumption of it alone, and again, not based on like outside
So
protocols.
what is a simple, like more simplistic? Me, harm
Yeah.
reduction is less harm. That's what I kind of think, but it's not. So what is, you know,
Yeah.
saying it quickly, what is harm reduction
So
versus
for
these other?
Yeah, so look, you can look up things and you'll find like the principles and all this other stuff. So for me, it's about uh, for
I
me
want
in my life, it is the practice of advocacy based on personal autonomy and just basic human rights. So it's like it's a human rights movement for me. Like that is how I see it. Again, there's tools that are associated with it that are risk reduction.
okay.
But
That broke
yeah,
it down.
yeah,
That's good.
you know what I
It's the
mean. So
advocate for personal autonomy, their choice. You're
yes,
providing freedom of power and choice. Okay,
that's it. That's
I
why
talk I
like
talk
it so
about it. I
much,
talk about
you
it
know.
all the time. So I'm with you on that. Here's my thing about harm reduction. I'm going to keep it simple because I'll just use like a commonsensical for older people like myself.
Yeah,
It's less harm. Look, if you're using heroin, you're shooting dope, you know, you're tying down, you're nodding out, you're almost ODing, you know, blah blah blah, and you're going to methadone clinic and you're prescribed something and the doctor's checking it out. Definitely less harm, right? I mean, that's kind of basic.
yeah,
I
I
mean,
mean
it's like a seatbelt. You're putting a seatbelt on. Okay, that's less harm,
yeah,
you know, an
that's
accident if you want to use it that way. But I'm looking at less harm. So if I'm not drinking Coca-Cola, I'm drinking this mint tea from my garden, which I got, versus a Coca-Cola. Would that be me? This is my definition of it,
yeah,
my sense of it. I'm
yeah.
doing
So
less harm to my body.
for the general public, that's usually a way that it is explained. I'm not saying I like don't agree with that. I think that that's valid. You know, I have people who are way more established in this in the harm reduction space than me that I've heard firsthand, you know, talk about, you know, these basic things that reduce harm. You know, I think a lot of times my advocacy goes in the direction of not just reducing harm, like not just advocating for the substance to change,
Right.
also also advocating for
It's
people who are
okay.
continuing to
It's
use the same
okay.
substance,
Right.
and understand that not necessarily that it's okay, but that
Well,
we need to do whatever we can to reduce harm for people who are not who do not want to stop doing what they're doing.
Right.
I think that we need to show up for people like that, and instead of waiting for some terrible thing to happen, we can advocate for things that are viewed as very radical. Like I've talked about how changing your mode of administration. If someone is not looking for so-called recovery or anything, they can they can go from using intravenously to like snorting or smoking, and that can objectively reduce harm in their life. And that sounds wild.
Yeah,
Like
no,
people hear that and they're like, oh my God, what? It
no.
doesn't mean that we're telling them to keep doing that. We're just acknowledging that there are some people out there who don't ever want to stop using drugs.
That's
And
exactly right.
those people exist. I'm sure you've seen them. They exist. And it's not that they're hopeless and
No,
incapable
that's their choice.
of
Their choice. I mean,
they're making a decision, and there's inherent harm. That's one part of harm reduction, is acknowledging the inherent harm of the illicit supply. So a lot of people, like, I think it's important to look at the philosophy and the principles, because there's a whole there's a whole aspect that's looked at in addressing the fact that illicit substance use can harm people. So I think a lot of people, they see harm reduction, they think it's like a denial of harm, and it's actually addressing the potential harms. And that's why for me, this is like a more, in the past year, I started to change my perspective, and go more into supporting change of mode of administration and things of that nature. And the interesting thing is again, based on the definition of recovery, to recover something, people can actually recover something from changing their mode of administration. And yeah, I mean, that's a hard pill to swallow for some people, though. I get it.
Okay, you know what? Let's get to, this is the DSM-5. Okay.
Yeah.
The DSM-5, me personally, this is only me personally. I know I'm going to get some pushback from people out there and saying, Bob, you're old, you don't know what you're talking about. But me personally, I think substance use disorder is a label also. Okay, that's just,
yeah.
that's
No,
just
I do.
me,
No, I do too,
and
Bobby.
the DSM-5 does say, it does say it's a chronic brain disease still. Okay, which I do not listen to. This thing here, if you really get into the APA, which is the American Psychiatric Association, or you get into the AMA, the APA, they sit around. There's 15 of them sit around a table and come up with a new disorder. Okay. And we're all in a disorder, no matter what. The world is in a disorder. But I don't even want that label.
I don't either, Bobby, and I don't adhere to that anymore. I will use the term substance use disorder way before I'll use addiction or alcoholism, but I only do so because there's just documented reduction in stigma, in that people are more receptive to it. But when it comes to my belief around it, I don't believe in any of that stuff anymore. I believe that we have habits that are established that may help or harm, and that we need to look at those. And you can add labels if you want, but they don't always help.
Black and white and everything in between.
Yeah.
What we agree on, we both agree on, you have the power of choice. You have the freedom and the power of choice. Some people, are mentally, there's some real mental issues, and they really need, I would imagine, I don't know, maybe they need special guidance or help or something. I don't know.
I mean, definitely there needs to be equity, not equality. So there needs to be an understanding of differences when it comes to accessibility, things
mental
people
health.
need.
Mental health is a
mental health
issue. And I believe that we have 1 minute left. I believe that the government is not helping at all. I believe the drugs, alcohol, blah, blah, blah. It's not gotten better over the last couple 100 years. I believe it's gotten worse.
Yeah, things have gotten worse for sure. And I mean, that's a whole other topic.
Sign out.